Okay, so welcome everyone to this live stream, and let me just set it up very quickly. Let me Okay, so welcome everyone to this live session, and we are a bit late today, but doesn't matter. Usually we do this live session at 12:30, but today we are a bit late, and this is going to be a technical session, and I'm going to discuss how to deploy the Spring microservices with the configuration server, Eureka server, and the gateway server. First in your local development environment, and then finally into your Docker's production environment, right? All right. So let me just first of all, let me just show you the projects that we have built. So I am using IntelliJ IDEA as my IDE, and all the projects are built in IntelliJ IDEA from the basic template. So if you want to create a new project for Spring Microservices, go to new project, and then you can choose a project from Spring Initializer, and then name it appropriately, and go to the next screen and choose the relevant dependencies. I'm not going to discuss in this video how to create a Spring Microservices project. That I'll leave for another video. But in this video, I will show you all these different microservices. Basically, I have 3 microservices by the name test service 1, 2, and 3. And then I have a configuration server, I have the Eureka server, and I also have the gateway server. I'll explain what these are briefly, but I'm assuming that you know all of this. But you are here just to see all of that in action. First, I'll deploy all of them in my local development environment. That means running on my own system. I'll allocate them different ports, and then once that is done, I will try to deploy them in the production environment, which is on my own machine, but that will be running inside the Docker containers. Okay, so let's move forward. Stop all these servers that I'm running. Okay, so that I can restart them and show you the relevant steps that are taken by the various microservices and the servers. All right, so let me just very quickly stop all these servers, and then I'll tell you okay, so coming back here, so what do we have? So we have 3 microservices, right? I've got 3 microservices, right? So I'll just put them here. I've got 3 microservices, and I'll name them. test service 1, two, okay, and test service 3. Okay, so we got 3 services: test service 1, 2, and 3. Basic microservices, that you can use to fetch data from the database, or talk to one another, or do present some sort of data to your client, right? So basic microservices. And then we have a configuration server. So when these microservices start up, right, so they will look for their configuration from this configuration server. So what is meant by configuration? Configuration means whatever data that they want at the startup time. For example, where is my database located, for example, or where is the Eureka server located, or where is the gateway server located, for example. All of that information will be fetched through the configuration server. So we have that. And then we have the Eureka server. Okay, so we have the Eureka server, which is basically going to register all the services that we have, test service 1, 2, 3, except the configuration service. The configuration server does not register itself with the Eureka server. Except the configuration server, all the services will register themselves with the Eureka server. And besides that, we have one more server, that is the gateway server. Okay, I'll explain what the gateway server does, right? So for now, just understand that we have 3 servers and 3 services. So configuration server is the one that comes up in the beginning, the first one, and then all these services will pick up their configuration from the configuration server, also the Eureka server and the gateway server. So that's the first thing that all these services and servers do, is that they go and pick up the configuration from the configuration server. Okay, and where does the configuration server has the configuration stored? So it's in my GitHub repository, right? So let's take a look. Where are the properties for the configuration, for the various services and servers? So it's right here. Okay, so all the properties are given here in various files. So we have development and production versions for both test service 1, 2, and 3, all 3 of them. One for development and one for production. For gateway server, we have the development version, and for the gateway server, we have the production. For the Eureka server, we just have the default. Okay, we don't have a development and production for Eureka server. So all the properties are on my GitHub repository. So the configuration server has the address for that. Okay, so that's where it fetches the configuration from. And then all these services will read their appropriate configuration from the configuration server. What does the Eureka server do? Well, the Eureka server will basically register all the services that are available in this particular let's call it orchestration, right? And I will run the Eureka server and also show you how does it get register all the services, and then how does it present it to you. Okay, so first of all, let's go ahead and let's restart the configuration server. So if you check here, this is my config server project. Okay, so I'm going to run it again, and we'll follow what are the log statements appear when the project is run, and from there we'll try to understand what's happening. Okay, so let us just scroll it like this. It's getting built first of all, and then it will be run. Okay, so now it's running. First of all, you see the Spring logo. Okay, so now let's follow the log statements. So starting config server using Java 1.8, no active profile set, so falling back to default. Okay, Tomcat initialized at port 8071. So we have assigned this particular server the port 8071 on my local development machine. Starting service Tomcat, servlet engine, so basically the container Apache Tomcat. It's the embedded server in this microservice. So the microservice is basically running within an embedded Apache Tomcat server. So I don't need a separate server to launch it into. The project is actually packaged as a jar and deployed, run as it is. So when the jar is run, first the Apache Tomcat server starts, and then within it the configuration server is deployed. Okay, so Tomcat started on port 8071 and the project is up in 20 seconds. JVM is running. All right, so now we have the configuration server up. Okay, so now we can go ahead and also start our Eureka server. So I'll run it again. It will be built again first of all. Okay, so now the Eureka server is being deployed on my local machine. The server port, as you can see, is 8070. Configuration server was on port 8071. Eureka server is on port 8070. So the Eureka server basically registers all the services. Whenever a microservice starts, it registers itself with the Eureka server. So starting Eureka server application, no active profile set, so falling back to default once again. Fetching configuration from server at localhost 8071, that's our configuration server. And then it located the environment Eureka server, profile default, right? And then Tomcat initialized with port 8070. Starting service Tomcat, starting servlet engine. Okay, so we can skip some of these things. Let's look at some important things. Okay, so Spring Cloud Load Balancer is currently working with the default cache. Okay, so the Cloud Balancer is also up. All the microservices have its own their own cloud balancers, right? So including the Eureka server. Okay, all right, let's move forward and let's see what else is there. 16 endpoints are released beneath the base path actuator. So if you go to actuator and we see the health, you can check out all these paths that have been released under the actuator path. Okay, all this will provide the data that we can check later on when we'll deploy the other microservices. All that data will appear here. So for now, let's see. Okay, so Tomcat started on port 8070. The Eureka server is up. Okay, so basically the configuration server here, if you see, the configuration server and the Eureka server are both up. Okay, and what we'll do now is we'll check out how the Eureka server looks like. So localhost 8070 is where my Eureka server is running. So let me open that. Okay, so this is my Eureka server, and right now instances currently registered with Eureka, none, no instances available. That's because configuration server does not register itself with the Eureka server. It does not. So the only other thing is Eureka server itself. There are no microservices up right now, so no instances are available. So let's go ahead and first of all let's deploy our gateway server. Okay, and it's gonna run on 8072, port 8072 on my local system. So let's just run it. Okay, let's see. Development profile is active, fetching configuration from server at HTTP localhost 8071. Okay, gateway server profiles development, and then it has actually registered itself with the Eureka server, which you can find here. Discovery client gateway server, right? So this is the name by which it has registered itself with the Eureka server. So here the statement says the registering application gateway server with Eureka with status up. Okay, updating port to 8072. So gateway server is running on port 8072 and it has registered itself with the Eureka server. So the Eureka server now knows that we have a gateway server running at port 8072, and that fact will be corroborated by this place. So if you see again, Eureka server instances currently registered, gateway server. Okay, now gateway server is up, and here it is. Okay, at port 8072. Okay, now let's go ahead and I'll start my first microservice, which is test service 1. So test service run, once it starts up, first of all, it will fetch its configuration from the configuration server, and then it will register itself with the Eureka server, and then the gateway server will be notified that a new microservice has registered with the Eureka server. So the gateway server will then automatically configure a path for the new microservice. I'll explain how that happens. But for now, the first microservice is starting up, and it will register itself with the Eureka server. So let's go ahead and see. So development profile is active. Configuration is fetched from localhost 8071, which is the configuration server. The following configuration is was found, and then the database beans and everything are being initialized. Okay, and the next thing that will happen is it will register itself with the Eureka server. Okay, so here's the statement: registering application test service 1 with Eureka with status up. Okay, and discovery client test service 1 registration status, and then test service application is Tomcat started on port 8083. So test service 1 is now running on port 8083, and it has registered itself with the Eureka server. And let's go back here and refresh the Eureka servers page, and you see here that test service 1 is also up on port 8083. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and start test service 2. Same thing is going to happen. Test service 1, 2 and 3 are identical in the way that the process that they do. That means first of all they fetch their configuration from the configuration server, and then they register themselves with the Eureka server. Okay, pretty much the same, but what they do internally is a bit different, and I'll show you what the difference is. Okay, so pretty much the same thing is going to happen for test service 2 as well. Now you can see registering application test service 2 with Eureka with status up. So let's go here and check with the Eureka server, and you see that test service 2 is also now available on port 8081. Okay, let's go ahead and do the same thing with test service 3. So the test service 3 is starting up now, right? Okay. So here is it. Tomcat started on port 8082 and registering application test service 3 with Eureka with status up. Okay, let's go back and check the Eureka server. And we see here that test service 1, 2, and 3 are up along with the gateway server. Okay, so basically now all the services and the servers that we have are up. Configuration server first of all, then the Eureka server, then the gateway server, then test service 1, 2, and 3. And it is appearing here, right? Gateway server, test service 1, 2, and 3. Configuration server does not register itself with the Eureka server. It can, but we have stopped it from doing so. Okay, so that's it. All right. Now what we're going to do is we're going to test what these services do. So for that we are using Postman, right? It's a basic tool to test our APIs. So we have, test run configured here with all our paths. So we have all these services and their paths configured here, right? So take a look at this. We have the 3 services running on 3 different ports. And then we have, the different paths for all the configurations for all, for the configuration server. So that's port 8071. If you check here, that's all configuration server, and 8080, 8081, and 8082. These are the 3 services, test service 1, 2, and 3. Just a slight change here, 8080, the first one, actually we are, using 8083. So that's just the name here on the left. The actual path is here, 8083. Because we know that test service 1 is actually running on port 8083. If you check here, test service 1 is running on port 8083. Okay. So now coming back to Postman, if you see all of that up here, configuration server and test service 1 and 2 and 3. Because Eureka server we can already check. Eureka server we can already check. We are seeing that everything that's happening in the Eureka server we can check from here. So there's no need to have a separate test in the Postman. But the last 3, if you see, that's the gateway server. So let's check what the URL is. If you see, if you take a look here, what's happening here is if you're using a gateway server which is actually optional, right? So a gateway server is actually optional in our case. So we can directly access the microservices. But if you're using a gateway server, you don't have to explicitly know the port on which the 3 microservices are running. That's the interesting thing, right? So in this case, when we have used these URLs, we have to know what is the port for the microservice, 8081, 2, 3, whatever, right? But if you're using a gateway server, you don't really, as a user, right? So when we are when we are using Postman here, we are the user, we are the client, right? So we don't know what's happening inside on what port, what microservices running. So we don't know that, right? So as a client, we just know, okay, this is the port number for the gateway server. So to access any microservice, I just have to go to the gateway, and that's how actually things happen in the real world, where you just have the domain of a website, for example, facebook.com or twitter.com or let's say airbnb.com, and that's what the gateway server signifies here. So all the requests from the client first of all hit the gateway server. So I know that as a client, I know the gateway server is running on 8072. That's enough for me to know, right? And after that, I know just the names of the different services. I don't know which port they are running on, right? So I know the names of the services are test service 1, test service 2, and test service 3. So what I do is I simply write the path of the gateway server, and then I append the name of the service, and then I append the route that I'm looking for. Okay. So I don't really need to know on which port test service 1 is running. Okay. So very quickly, I'm gonna, run this test. Okay. Run collection, all these paths, right? I'm gonna run them. So basically Postman is going to send requests to all of them and check them. And if you see, we are getting status 200 for all of them. Okay. So this is done. Okay. So all these URLs are working perfectly fine. That means all our servers and all our microservices are working absolutely fine. Okay, so with this, I'm going to, stop all these servers and services. First of all, I'll stop all the services, and then I'll stop the gateway server, then the Eureka server, and then the configuration server in the reverse order, right? The reason for that is because there's a dependency, right? So I first stop the things that are dependent on others. And then what I'll do is, right now I tested all these services in my local development environment, as the Spring profile here shows. It's a development environment, right? And local host. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to stop all these services, and then I'm going to relaunch these services, but now in the production environment, which is my Docker container, right? So this is basically my Docker. So I'm going to launch all these servers within the Docker using the Docker daemon. So I'll show that to you how I'm going to do that. So basically, no, they will not be using local host anymore. They will move behind the bridge of the Docker. So they will not be able to access the local host. I'll show that to so that, that launching these same servers and microservices in your own Docker container, or launching it on, let's say, the ECS or Elastic Container Service on AWS is just the same thing. So basically, I'm now packaging all my servers and services and now deploying them into my production environment. Doesn't matter where the Docker daemon exists, whether it exists on my own machine or whether it exists on AWS. So basically, I'm now going to launch my code into the production environment, right? So first of all, I'm going to stop all the services. Test service 1 is stopped. 2 is stopped. 3. And then the gateway server. Then the Eureka server. And then the configuration server at last. Okay. Okay. All these services are stopped. Gateway server stopped. Eureka server is also stopped. And then configuration server is also stopped. Okay, so now I can safely close all the projects. So I'm in configuration bomb, and I'm gonna close all other projects. Okay, because I just need the configuration, because I have the docker compose.yml file in my configuration. It's just I have kept it here. It's not necessary. I can keep it anywhere, but I have it here. So I'm going to close all other projects, and then I'm going to use this docker compose.yml file to restart and redeploy all these services now in the Docker containers, right? So let's close all of this. All the other projects are gone. Okay, so let me very quickly take you through how this docker compose.yml file looks like. Okay, so I'm not gonna go into the details of how it's docker compose.yml is written, but I'm just gonna show you what's written in my docker compose.yml. So we have all the services listed one by one, right? So all the services. The first service that I have is config server. Okay, configuration server, and the image is on my Docker Hub repository, IntelliJ, and then config server 0.1. If you want to fetch it, you can use this image. You don't have to do anything else. Just you can fetch it. In fact, this docker compose.yml file itself you'll find on my GitHub repository. So you can go to my GitHub repository, IntelliJ. Right, github.com/IndiaGator. You can type that, and you can go to the repositories, and you will find all the repositories here. Config server, test service 1, gateway server, the properties, test service 3, 2, and Eureka server. All of them are here. You can find out, in fact, this Docker YAML file also you'll find in the config server project. Okay, so you can fork that project, clone it on your machine, and run it on your own system also if you have Docker, or anywhere else if you are using Dockers even on a remote system, right? You can pull these images from the Docker hub. Okay, so that's the image. I'm running it on port 8071. Name is config server. Okay, the next is Eureka server. Image is here, IndiaGator/Eureka server, image 0.4. And then it looks for configuration on config server 8071. Just notice the fact that it's not local host anymore, because once you have launched your microservices into the Docker environment, it cannot access local host anymore, right? So it is accessing the configuration server by its own host name, which is config server, okay, on port 8071. So now Eureka server will fetch its configuration from config server at port 8071. Okay, and it depends on the configuration server that it should be started. And the Eureka server here, if you see, is running on port 8070. So basically the port mapping is same as that of my own development environment, right? So config is 8071, Eureka is once again 8070. Then we have all the three services: test service 1, test service 2, and test service 3. The images are listed here, right? IndiaGator/test service 1 image fresh 0.5. Make sure you use the same image, otherwise it can cause problems. Okay, so that again fetches its configuration from config server 8071. You can ignore this database port, it doesn't matter. Configuration server port is 8071. Okay, and it depends on both the configuration server and the Eureka server. That's the interesting thing. And it runs on 8080 port. Same goes for test service 2. Everything is same except for the port number. Test service 2 runs on 8081. Test service 3, everything is same except it runs on 8082. Right? There's no gateway server here in this YAML file. Okay, there's no gateway server here. It's the configuration server, the Eureka server, and test service 1, test service 2, and test service 3. There's no gateway server here. Okay. Networks, backend driver, bridge. So there's no gateway server here. Except the gateway server, we have everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to one by one launch these services. I'm not going to run the Docker YAML file as one. I'm not going to do that, because what happens is the configuration server might not have initiated properly, and the Eureka server goes and pings it and then doesn't find that it's up and it fails, right? So I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start them one by one using this single green flag that you see here, right? So first of all, I'm going to run the configuration server. Once I'm sure that it's up, only then I'm going to fire up the Eureka server. And once the Eureka server is up, only then I'm going to fire the test service 1, 2, and 3. And just to be sure, let me show you that the Eureka server is actually down right now. It's not running on my local machine anymore, so I cannot access the Eureka server. I will be able to access it only when it runs now in my Docker environment. Okay. So it's creating the configuration server. It's launching that image into the Docker environment. It's done. Let's come and check here. So if you see here, the configuration server is launched. So let's go and see what's happening inside the log. It's running at port 8071 port. So this is the log for the configuration server running inside the Docker container. Yeah, so it's starting up. Once it's fully started, only then will I launch the Eureka server. Okay, so this is usually the last statement, JVM running for such and such seconds. Okay, so now it's up. Now let's go back here and let's start the Eureka server. Once I see done here, then I'll go and check it inside the Docker UI. Okay, so it's done. Now let's go and check it inside the Docker UI. Let's go back. And now we have the Eureka server as well, running on port 8070. Let's see the logs. It's taking some time. Yeah, now it's up. Yeah, it has actually contacted the configuration server, located the environment default Eureka server. Okay, initialize on port 8070. Okay, JVM running. So now that our Eureka server is up, I can refresh this and I'll find my Eureka server here. Okay, so now it's running inside the daemon. That's the difference. It's not running in my development environment. It's now running in my production environment, but still there are no instances available. So what I'll go ahead and I'll start the various services. Test service 1, test service 2, test service 3. Okay. For some reason it hasn't started, so let's try again. Test service 1. It's trying to start it. It's done. Okay, you can find it here. Test service 1 is up. Let's go ahead and start test service 2. Okay, and now let's go ahead and start test service 3. Okay, so all 3 services are now up. Let's go and check the last one, because if that one is up, then 1 or 2 are definitely up. Once all 3 are up, we'll go back to our Eureka server localhost 8070 and check the status, whether they have registered themselves with the Eureka server. Okay, starting up. The important point when you are deploying your services within the Docker daemon is that you have to appreciate the time it takes to start up a particular service. So don't start services together, right? Start one and then wait till it initializes properly, and then only you start its dependence, the dependent services, right? Don't do everything in quick succession, because that doesn't work when you are in your production environment. You should wait for all the dependencies to come up properly before you start the dependent services. Okay, so the final service is also getting up. Next, it will register itself with the Eureka service. Okay. So JVM is running. That means all the services are up. Now let's go back here and refresh our Eureka server. And you see that test service 1, 2, and 3 are all registered on ports 8081, 8082, and 8080. Okay. So that's it. In this demo, I have shown you how to launch the Spring microservices with the configuration, Eureka, and gateway servers. In the development environment, first of all, that could be a local machine. And then finally into the production environment, which most probably these days will be the Docker container environment. It might be on any of these cloud providers. Most probably it will be on AWS. If it's AWS, it will be either ECS or EKS. ECS is Elastic Container Service, and EKS is Elastic Kubernetes Service. But the basic concepts remain the same. You bring up the configuration server first, then you bring up the Eureka server, then the gateway server is optional. Okay, and initially when you are trying things in production environment, definitely the gateway server is required for security concerns, and also if you are using GraphQL or similar gateway API gateways. So gateway server is a must in that case. And then you bring up all the services 1, 2, and 3. Okay, and now let's go to, before ending this session, I'll run these tests again, and all these tests will pass except the gateway test, because the gateway server is not up now, right? So let us run these tests again. So I'm going to run the collection once again, and you'll see 200 okay status for all of them except for the last 3. In fact, even for the first one, you'll see a failure because that's pinging 8083, but there's nothing on 8083 now. It's on 8080. So let us, make a change to that. Let's make a quick change to that. Okay, let's make a quick change to that. So it's coming back here. Let me change it back to 8080, because once it's in the production environment, the port is, changed back to 8080. So let me run it again. Okay, now it's okay. It's running. Everything will work fine except the last 3, because the gateway server is not up. Okay, so the final one, if you see, gateway test service 1/health doesn't work. So it's stopped the run at that. So we know all the services are up, the configuration server is up, and also the Eureka server is up, because you can see this. So in this very brief demo, you have seen, how easy it is to bring up Spring microservices with configuration, Eureka, and gateway servers, both in the test environment, your development environment, and also in your production environment. In other sessions, I will show you other aspects. For example, security aspects, how to implement them, the tracing aspects where you log data and maybe visualize it using the ELK stack, Elasticache, Logstash, and the Kibana stack, or maybe using Spring Cloud Sleuth and Zipkin, right? So I'll show that to you in another one, and then I also show you how to set up a CI/CD pipeline using Jenkins and GitHub repository. Okay, that will be in other demos, and then I'll also show you how to maybe integrate your APIs through using GraphQL, using a gateway API gateway, using a gateway